Okay. All right. So we are live. We
Yeah.
are live. We are live. We're live. All right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna copy the link from this and then send it out as a reminder. You can let me know if you are able to access the live and as well on your end.
Okay. Yeah, it's showing live on all.
Awesome. All right. Good day, everyone. We're just gonna wait for a bit for persons to come in. We're having a very interesting conversation today as part of the 16 days of international awareness of gender-based violence. It is a very interesting topic, and we have two very able guests, and we will be diving in a short while. All right. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Let us see. Copy this and go here. It is the 5th of December. How are you guys Christmas plans going?
I am not feeling Christmassy at all.
Are you serious?
Probably need to hear more soca parang, but I need pastels. If I get pastels from Lupino, I think the Christmas feeling will come in.
So the need, the desire, the requirement
Mm-hmm.
is pastels from where?
Lupino, specifically.
Ah,
That's when you get the real Spanish pastels.
so you don't want it from nowhere else.
Well, I mean, I will have it if it's offered to me. I'm too
No.
well bred to refuse. But
If I must, then fine. I will suffer somewhere else's pastels. If I
no, but
must.
I really like the ones from there. It's well seasoned and they have ruku in it, so that's important. Hmm.
Uh, what is Ruku?
But the one thing I don't miss about Christmas time is that hustle and
Oh, you are not hearing you all of a sudden. You answer, are you hearing her? Or is it just me?
No, I think she is frozen.
We're gonna do
Okay,
something
so
about
while we wait to come back, we're asking about the Christmas time. Over the last maybe 2, 3 years, I've been redefining what Christmas is for me. So just like Celine said, she's not feeling Christmassy. I'm not too sure what that is right now, so I kind of redefine that. My main thing is making sure I'm not being the rush. One, and then making sure people always say January is the longest month of the year in terms of finances and stuff.
yeah.
So I want to make sure that January is not a long month for me. So every year I'm doing my best to pay January bills in advance.
What? Hey, that
Yeah,
right there is something I that's a good one. That's a good one. So
yeah, yeah.
while
So
you're
I,
in
I ain't
hustle and
perfected
bustle,
yet, but
yeah,
every year I'm a little better. So even if I have quote unquote less money in December,
yeah,
when January 1st comes, I could feel settled because I know at least Last year I did 20% of the bills. Maybe I aiming for 50% now.
See, see. I feel you. I feel you. What you definitely don't want is you definitely Celine.
Right.
Welcome back.
I don't know what's happening with my internet provider this evening. I won't call any names.
I was about to say,
I won't call any names, just in case in the future, one of
you
us
know,
in our practices, we will be getting some kind of a sponsorship, so we won't call any names.
true, true, true. Yeah, Yance was just saying that he's trying to pay his this January bills in December, so that when January comes around, it's a lot less stressful.
I agree. I agree. I'm actually thinking in 2025 already. So it's like whatever extras will go towards Christmas, but I'm not fussing because when we do it the other way around, then you have to face the 99 days of January.
99 for the first 2 weeks.
I know.
Exactly. Exactly. So that I my Christmas, when I think about Christmas now, I want to make sure I'm not even thinking about that turmoil I went through for a lot of my life.
Yeah, yeah. You want to enter the new year feeling good, that everything is still under control, you know? So, yeah. So, we inside. I hope I don't get hung again with my internet. I don't know what's going on.
I hope that's not an issue either. All right, so we are back and we are talking about oh, let's see. So Sean Mark says Ruku, something the old people used to whisper. All right.
Roku.
What is it made of? What is that exactly?
It's a spice. You would want to call it a spice,
Uh-huh.
and you boil it and extract the water from it. And a lot of people use it in their cooking. So you would find that when you get those pastas from people use it in stew and stuff like that as well. It gives it a different kind of a flavor. And a lot of Indian dishes are used, like if you want the Thai meals, those dishes, you will find that they use ruku as well. Ruku as well. There's a superstition that you have to whisper it. I don't know.
Oh, okay,
I
okay,
don't know,
okay.
but it just needs to be there in the food. Where's Johan say?
Interesting.
Right.
Very interesting.
Right here, right here.
All right. Well, let's 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 begin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can.
All right, so welcome to our first live in a very long time. We're going to be discussing the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, and I would be presumptuous to attempt to try to pull that stunt off by myself without, of course, inviting some very well-versed and eloquent guests as well. These persons are definitely not strangers to me, and so I want to invite. Well, I want to basically introduce Celine Griffith. Celine is you'll definitely be hearing her voice on one of the best stations in Trinidad and Tobago. She also has her own podcast. Um, and one of the things she's interested in is naked conversations where one opens up their themselves to conversations that have depth. And so because we're going to be opening up ourselves to a conversation that has a lot of depth, it's only befitting that Sailing Griffith is a part of this. We have Johanse as well, and Johanse is a behavioral psychologist. He doesn't like to use the word psychologist, but that is what it is. A man who is versed in connecting the dots, which will be definitely necessary as we talk about gender-based violence and the trauma and the intricacies that it involves. So guests, welcome and thank you so much for being part of this live.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for having me as well. It's an honor. Hello to your viewers also, and Johansi and Alvin. It's always a pleasure to speak with you both, as you know.
For sure, for sure. All right. So now I wanted to have this conversation about the 16 days of remembrance as it pertains to the sorry, it's been a long day and I'm a little bit tired. The gender-based violence, because one of the things I've come to realize is when it comes on to these conversations, it tends to be how you're feeling, oh, you're strong, you'll do better. But there tends to be not a lot of depth. And for there to be growth, there needs to be some level of discomfort. And for there to be growth, we need to look at the challenges from many different angles. So I wanted us to discuss some of those angles today. And on that note, on that note, understanding the psychological impact of gender-based violence. What is that? Johan, have you in your time, what has what does that look like when you interact with persons who have had issues with gender-based violence? What are
Now,
those?
when we refer into gender-based violence, right? Now,
Uh-huh.
using that word specific, even understanding what exactly is gender,
Mm.
right? And without Googling it, right, or going into any psychology book, right? Gender is more of a social construct on what a male or female or whatever gender you choose to be attribute based on that society, based on your family, etc., versus sex, which is a biological category, which is right, male and female. So when you say gender-based violence, and of course, it's violence based on your gender, right? And that in itself could be a little touchy because when I ask people, because in preparing for this, I asked some people, when you hear the word gender, the phrase gender-based violence, what do you think of? And most people, this is both male and female, said some sort of violence against women. And that was interesting because female or being a woman is not the only gender, right? And being a woman or female in itself is not even a gender, that's sex. So I'm putting all of those things out there, not to make it complicated, but to show you when in human dynamics how difficult it can be sometimes when you use that word gender-based violence and saying that somebody is a victim of violence because of their gender. So I'm putting that out first. Tell me your thoughts.
Well, I think that I love the part where you said it is not specific to women because a lot of people go away with that knowledge that it pertains to women only, and we have not just the male and female gender anymore. Whether we want to accept that or not, this is what we are faced with in our world today. And so, gender, we have lots of different types of genders, and gender based violence is not specific to women only, as we know. But because women in the majority have been exposed to the violence, as we have seen both just in Trinidad and Tobago alone and globally, when you look at some of the like the fundamentalist states where women are still deprived of an education or even to be computer literate or anything like that, when you see that, that is a form of gender-based violence as well, because it is women being prevented from having access to simple, not simple things, but the regular things that we enjoy for free on a daily basis, right? And so when we look at that now and we take it into the realm of sexuality in terms of the way that women are being treated from a sexual standpoint and disrespected as well. A lot of the infringement falls upon women, and you think that it's easy in that regard for it to be associated with women only. But I love the fact that you started off with that, Johanse, because gender-based violence is not specific to women only. But for the purpose of this conversation and for the 16 days of activism, we are talking about ending violence against women and girls in this regard. So, yeah. But we definitely need to touch on that part where it is not specific to women only. We definitely need to touch on that part.
Hey, I like where you tie that up, eh? She's like, well, there men do experience it as well. However, for this particular time period, and that's interesting because one of my challenges is the word, well, many words, but one of them is violence, because nowadays everybody talking about you're being violent towards them. I think for me, if it can be viewed as abuse, then we can term it as violence, because you have, or rather, if we can, if it is abuse, then we can look at it as something that needs to be addressed. For instance, someone might argue that if I cuss them out, I'm not being violent. However, your words can cause someone to be emotionally abused. Therefore, the idea of gender based violence to me doesn't necessarily encompass all the possibilities, because there can be financial abuse, and that isn't violence, or is it? What are your thoughts
Well,
on that
well,
idea?
well, Alvin, I'm glad you raised that because
Celine explained it a
violence,
while ago.
right? Even the definition of violence is a behavior with the intent to hurt, right? So it's not even we talking about physical, emotional, financial. We haven't been specific enough. It's any behavior with the intent to hurt, right? And I will even add an element because that behavior, even though there's an intent to hurt, it don't even have to hurt the other person to still be by violence from that person. So let me give an example. Let's just say I get angry and I pick up a piece of paper and I throw it at someone. And my intent is to hurt them with the paper, because I'm so angry. But it's a piece of paper. So the paper may not hurt them. But in that moment, it is still violence, right? So I hit tell the paper, and paper hit the person. Now they may not be hurt, but my intent is to hurt. And understanding that could even help us understand even the root of some of these things and how we even define violence. So again, for me, and even if I think you look at the dictionary meaning of violence, is the any behavior with the intent to hurt.
But when you talk about intent to hurt, sometimes people don't. I want to agree and disagree to some extent with that, Johanse, because the intent part, sometimes people don't know what they're doing. And if you are a person who you're already experiencing it, I saw something just a couple days ago on Facebook, I think it was, where they said somebody who grew up, and I'm paraphrasing it because of course I can't remember. If you grew up in an environment, in a particular environment where there was abuse or a toxic environment, you could use that to hurt people, or you could also use that to heal people. I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember how it went, but it really spoke to whatever your experiences were, or all of that. So I'm just saying this because people may not intentionally want to harm someone else or to be violent towards someone else, or they may not intentionally want to do that, but because they probably just don't know any differently, and this is what makes them feel that they could do this, and it only is brought to their attention when the person says to them, this doesn't make me feel very good. Or if you're honest with yourself and you recognize that the relationship is damaged with that person, whomever it is, you say to yourself, wait, I'm not feeling to be in this person's presence anymore. They don't make me feel comfortable. Is it that the person, the offender, is it that they were really intending to hurt you, or they just don't have a clue? So that's the part of it where I wanted to to challenge you there a little bit, because I don't know if people intentionally want to be violent towards someone else, but sometimes they have their own storm going on that they can't even help themselves. And this is not an excuse at all, because oftentimes you find that you want people to be a little more cognizant of their behavior. And this is why we have conversations like this also, to encourage people to be a little more aware of themselves and then the way that they interact with other people. If you're not aware of yourself and you know what it is you're saying or pelting a piece of paper, well, in that case, yes, pelting a piece of paper was intentional to hurt the person. But to say that, let's use a more realistic example here. Alvin spoke about financial abuse. People don't realize how many people experience financial abuse, because whomever has the power in the space, the household, the organization, or whatever it is, whoever holds that power may feel as though they have the decision, the final decision to make in terms of who gets what and how much. So this now leads us to that part of the conversation where women are always talking about the disparity in pay in certain organizations, but that's a whole other conversation, right? Because we could talk about that in its entirety as well. But we on the part now where we're talking about violence and intent. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Alvin to hear his views
But
there.
you took fire yeah, and then you run. Hold on, one. Oh gosh. We need to have a conversation about. Oh gosh, Celine, don't stop me, don't stop me, don't stop me. I think it's interesting because what tends to happen oftentimes, let us say that you're talking to a virgin or whether it's virgin is male or female,
Mm.
and you run a joke and they're like, "Warm to you, man," and they hit you. Is that violence?
They call that a big love.
Even that term Tobago love could be toxic, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and and that's why again I'm silly and I'm glad you raised the point in terms of one, we having a conversation,
Yeah.
and two, when you spoke about people's upbringing and what they are accustomed to versus what somebody else may not be accustomed to,
Right.
right? And I haven't spoken to every perpetrator in the world to know what in their mind, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm usually curious to speak to perpetrators. And I spent some years doing counseling in prisons, right, in the prison system, and even having clients who perpetrated some sort of violence, whether it is physical, mental, emotional, along those lines. And most times they know what they were doing. Nobody didn't do it by accident, right? And even if let's call it an emotional response, so let's go with physical violence first. Something happened, and let's just say there was a rush of emotion, and you exert some sort of physical violence. In that moment, you still wanted to hurt the person, you still wanted to convince the person of something, you still wanted to make the person feel as hurt as you feel. There still was an intent.
Right.
It wasn't a positive intent. So let's just go. It wasn't a
Right.
positive intent.
Yeah.
So that's why you see this violence, and I always raise it because when you get to the truth of people, nobody just hurt anybody by accident,
Mm.
right? And so let me just say, I'll just give an example. And this may not go in the realms of violence, but I'll give a couple scenario. Let's just say I went down the road and I didn't tell my partner anything, right? Or I went down the road and I did something and I didn't tell a friend something. And I would say, well, I accustomed just doing my thing, right? In that moment, the person might feel hurt. Now, this is not going all the way to abuse, right? But in
Right.
that moment, the person might feel hurt, and I will say, well, that's just how I accustomed doing things. So let's say in that moment, right? I didn't intend to, I just do my thing, and the person felt hurt.
Right.
Now, after that, if I still do it, knowing that this may quote unquote hurt the person, and I might say, well, it's nothing to me, right? Then we could start to come in the realms of intent. So
Right.
it is possible, and this is really on I using the word trivial loosely, but my practices could be, which is, let's say, my normal practice of doing things, could be interpreted by someone as hurtful, or you do that to get me vex, or you do that to spite me, or you do, and I say, no, well, that's just how I operate,
Mhm.
right? But after having that conversation, then if it is still practice, then you know for sure is I intent. Because if I say usually do something and I don't want to change, right? And in me not wanting to change, the person feels hurt. My intent is not to hurt, but hurt still occurs.
Yeah.
So I would even correct myself instead of the intent to hurt versus acknowledging that some hurt occurred in the interaction.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. The conversation surrounding gender-based violence, which is what we came to discuss this evening, right? Um, I just wanted to touch on because we were talking about the psychological impact of gender-based violence and the way that genders, the various genders interact and all of that. And we then went into talking about violence with intent, or violence being something that, or defined as something that is intentional. But so many conversations have been taking place because this is not the first year that the 16 days of activism to end violence against women and girls is taking place. And the theme this year is about uniting, right? So that we want to have no excuses at all when we relate to this, when we're addressing this topic. But yet, and this is something I oftentimes will share with my audience as well, because it's like, even when we talk about World Day of Peace or any sort of commemoration or observance, you find that the conversations are going on. They are growing, yes, and we are very thankful for that. And all of the efforts from various organizations, because there are lots of conversations taking place in these 16 days. I know of at least two which have taken place so far. Ours is the third one. And we talk about this all the time, but yet the statistics will show you that we have so many, and now with the introduction of so many other types of genders, I know that this is going to be a part of the conversation as well, where people haven't come to terms with homosexuality or whatever. What is the term that we're using right now? Because I want to be PC alive, so I want to be PC. And whatever that term is that we're using right now, respecting everybody's gender or choice of gender, as the case may be, it requires a certain level of understanding of yourself, I would say. Understanding of yourself to the extent where you know what you will and will not accept in your space. So if it is that these conversations are taking place all the time, and we hear about, take for example, women who are abused in the home, you hear about that, and yet it's still going on. And we ask ourselves, what is really going on? Why is it that this is still growing when we have so many conversations and we're bringing this into the spotlight? And one of the things I think that contribute to that is us saying, well, if you didn't do this, or if you didn't behave this way, or if you didn't say that, this wouldn't have happened to you. What are your thoughts about that, gentlemen?
Well, one, I would say that that's a good question when you ask about it growing, right? Because I was thinking about that also. Why is it still growing? And one major reason I came up with, and because of my professional experience with dealing with couples, and is that people tend to run from
Mm,
the truth of how they feel, right? I'm going to feel first
yes.
because violence in itself, whatever form, is not something that you wake up and feel violent. It comes with different types of feelings. Resentment comes in, slight annoyances and things build up. You don't say anything, right? Both whether for male, female, or even some of the homosexual and same sex couples that come and see me, right? one common theme is one being afraid or don't want to share their truth. Two
Mm-hmm.
is hiding their emotions or not saying how they really feel. And then also trying to make the other person into something that they're not, which again is not facing the truth, right? And I just showing that that's not necessarily a gender based something, that is a human based something.
Yeah.
And then if we get specific to gender, is that a lot of men have a certain idea of what a woman should be, or a girlfriend or a wife, and they want this person that they were to fit into that. And if it's not, then anger or violence manifest itself in whatever way. It could be all along those ways. And I know it's specific to women because, of course, the reverse is also true, but we're going specific to women. So a lot of men want their woman to be the woman that they envision, and sometimes when it is not in alignment with that, then based on their coping mechanisms, then they would institute violence.
Yeah. Yeah. Robin.
All right, so that's an interesting question. I like to look on it on a holistic point of view. So one of the things I do is, of course, I go into the schools and I talk to the young men and the young ladies, and I am big on encouraging them to develop their emotional intelligence.
Right.
Because for me, it needs to be holistic. It's not just about talking, it's about helping to develop the young people so that they are able to manage their emotions and their emotional responses so that they don't lash out at other persons. It is also important for them to understand different persons and to recognize if an individual has characteristics of an abuser, so that in recognizing this, they can reduce the probability of having a relationship with that person. Now, a very noteworthy person recently said, "You need to be careful of who you allow in a bedroom," and everybody was upset. But another person who was a victim of abuse said the same thing. They probably had said it with a softer tone, and no one was upset. We have to appreciate that yes, the abuser is wrong. However, just as though if I go down a particular area in Port of Spain with a gold chain on and two slave band, and I get robbed, people are sad that I got robbed, but they're also saying, "Why on earth did you go down that road?" We have to appreciate that saying to someone, "These are the ways that you can reduce a negative thing happening," is not the same as victim blaming or victim shaming. The perpetrator is wrong, full stop. We must also appreciate the fact that there is nothing wrong with us saying, when you're driving on the road, be careful. Or when you're going on the road, be careful of anyone who does XYZ. It has to be both things happening at the same time. Because one, the perpetrator is wrong. However, you have to put things in place. It's like this. Parents will get upset when the child is bullied. And they say, "What is the school doing?" There is so much the school can do and no more. You get upset that there is a crime that has been committed, and you say, "What is the police doing?" But the purpose of the police is to respond to something that is negative. A police will never be on every corner of every street. And therefore, we say, be careful of the time you go out. If you're going to be drawing money, you need to watch and ensure that you're not being followed. If you're going with large sums, you need to make sure you go with someone else. That's not saying if you get robbed, the person who robbed you didn't do something wrong. What we have to appreciate is the world, it has good people and it has evil people. And since the world has evil people, we must all equip ourselves to function best. And if you're equipping yourself to function best, you must also try as much as possible to avoid those things which are evil. And that's not saying if it happens to you and you did something wrong, then it's all on you. What we're saying is it can happen to you even if you've done nothing wrong. You could be minding your own business and something can happen. And whether or not you are in A position, B position, or C position, the fact is the person who perpetrated it, that action is still guilty regardless. So we have to be bold enough, but broad enough to say, hey, avoid these situations because they're dangerous and not be afraid of somebody saying, what you victim blaming? No. If I tell you, don't go to Army Fet with $20,000 worth of gold on your neck, I'm not victim blaming you. I'm trying to reduce the probability of you coming back with a very bad story. And I don't think we generally, we're too afraid of having, and that's why I'm happy to have you guys here. So we can have these discussions because, sometimes boy, should I say that? Kind of verb.
Well, first of all, you could go with your 20,000 on the chain army fake. Ain't nobody touching you there. So I
Right,
heard.
wrong example. All right, next
Wrong
fit.
example. It's true. I've never been. But I do agree to the point where, a lot of people try to use the term that you're victim shaming when you highlight something that someone did. One thing that is happening very frequently these days is people buying things off of Facebook or
Yeah,
trying to meet up with people that they met on Facebook, right? So it's a kind of similar example there. You have been seeing examples of how that is not such a good practice, or meet by a police station, you meet in a public place, but yet you always hear somebody getting robbed or the like, which is very unfortunate. But one part where I will disagree with you, Alvin, where you said, and I know you were saying try as much as possible to avoid a situation. So let's bring it back to the context of women going out, having a good time. Yeah, you might go out in your group of friends, but suppose some predator outside there decides to tackle one person in the group, and you're doing everything right because the information is out there. So everybody, to a large extent, I want to believe that everybody is trying their best to do what they can to preserve their life and the quality of their life, the experiences that they have. So yes, you would want to say, you would hear people talk about the way that women dress, so they would hear about the way that they behave and stuff like that, and we would want people to address those things. But at the end of the day, and I like the fact that you prefaced it with the perpetrator's action is wrong, and yes, so that aside, preparing and trying to avoid something from happening, I don't think you could do that, because whether you go out any night or any day, if something is going to happen, if somebody decides on that day to make you the target, it's going to happen.
you're right, but so we're not disagreeing. Anything
Right.
can happen to anyone.
Let me jump in a little bit now. Let me jump in a
Yeah.
little bit. Right? So the middle ground even between y'all, because both of y'all made valid points. And Celine, when you started off saying that even though we do all the awareness, even though we do all these different things, the numbers still increasing,
Yeah.
right? It reminded me of maybe about 2, 3 years ago when I started doing work with students for bullying, right? Victims for bullying. And for years before, when bullying became a flash word, that we a lot of awareness, a lot of lectures, a lot of everything, and bullying just increased,
Yeah.
right? So what I started doing is not even concentrating on the bullies, but empowering the victims or potential victims, right?
Right.
Even helping the victims. And this might sound is unpopular. I could even say, well, you look like you could get bullied. And they're like, what I look like? And we went through the things like what a predator looks for. Now, I don't know
Yeah,
every predator,
for
right? I
sure.
don't know every bully, but
Yeah.
I know a lot of human beings. I know myself, and I mean I went through school and etc. So
Yeah.
it was more about empowering the victims or potential victims
Yeah.
versus trying to rehabilitate the perpetrators. And at least in my sphere, the
Mm-hmm.
incidence of bullying reduced. Right.
Right.
So I use bullying as the example, but we could extrapolate it also to this, which
Yeah.
is we have all the awareness of gender-based violence, or even units dedicated to that now,
Mm-hmm.
but the number's still rising. So
Yeah.
maybe part of it is empowering the woman more than
Yeah.
trying to find or rehabilitate the
Yeah.
victims. And I'll tell you, I have a friend of mine, he owns a security company. And we thought about doing lectures for specific for women, how to spot a predator, how to understand that even though you quote unquote maybe doing the right thing, these things that you're doing could be possible signals to predators. Now, again, it's
Mm.
not the person's fault because let's just say we live in a free country. People supposed to be able, and I'm saying supposed to be able to do
Mm-hmm.
what they want and not be violated for it. But
Correct.
suppose is fantasy. Suppose is what it should be
Yeah.
versus what it is. And if
Yeah.
we understand what it is, if we understand that we cannot, and I'm saying I have no evidence to prove that we cannot reach every potential perpetrator, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if that is not working thus far, so maybe you should try something new, which is
Mm-hmm.
empowering the
Victim.
victim, the potential victim, so
Yeah.
that they could mitigate or eliminate. Well, let's not say eliminate it because it's not a perfect system, but at least mitigate or reduce the
Yeah.
instances of being abused in some way of violence against them.
Which is exactly what Alvin was just saying there. But the thing is, what does that look like? What have you both seen that look like? Because we have women who will stand up and say, okay, I don't like this behavior and all of that. But people could get carried away. And as you were just saying, Johan, say, we're not living in an absolute world where it's either black or white. We don't ever get it like that. So there will still be situations where things are still amiss. But you find that people could get a little extreme. Because what I have noticed, and I mean, I've spoken about this on my podcast, and I've spoken about this in conversations with you both whilst you were on my morning show, where women and my ladies who are listening, listen to me, don't come from here. But I'm just
Disclaimer.
sometimes we go to the extreme because yes, we are empowered. We are empowering and we are enlightening ourselves with what is happening around us. We want to be more woke, using the young people word that I was told not to, and we want to be more aware of what's going on around us and be prepared and all of these kinds of things because the information is out there. So we are educating ourselves in that regard. But sometimes we can get a little extreme where in empowering yourself and in empowering each other as women, uplifting each other as women, we tend to demoralize the man and we expect him to still have respect for us. That is where I find that there is a bit of a disconnect because I cannot see us trying to diminish someone else by and believe at the same point in time that we are uplifting ourselves. So what do we do as women, because we're on that topic today, what do we do as women to empower the community, not just each other, but the community? Because we have to help men, children. Okay, we're looking at it from a gender perspective. So we want to help men to respect us because they always say, teach people how to love you. And so the only way you could do that is by loving yourself. So that is now the point that both Johanse and Alvin made in terms of equipping yourself with certain things. We speak about women on women violence, and you know it is very very prevalent as well. Women on women violence, and we tend to say it's just the men who do it to the women. But when you look at one in the same sex relationships, we don't talk about things like that where women who are in same-sex relationships are abusive to their partners. But you do hear about that all the time. It's probably in the minority, right? And the other thing is Women on on a regular day, we say to each other, woman power, and I uplift you, and you're too, you're a queen, you're so beautiful, and all of that. But do we really mean it? Let's be real, women. Do we really mean it? For me, I'm a vibes person. I pick up vibes real easy, and I find that we have some mocking pretenders out there. But maybe it's just in the process. It's in the process of getting to where we really want to be, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that because Rome wasn't built in a day. But I want to ask the gentleman here: have you noticed that as well? In terms of women being respected, for men to be able to do that, do you think that we are encouraging each other in this space authentically to be able to achieve that?
Well, that's a good point you raised, and I'm glad you raised it as a woman because sometimes when men raise it, they get some heat for it, right? But
I'm getting to
even even as you're saying, a woman may diminish a man, right? Diminishing of somebody, man or woman, that's violence,
it
That's
is.
an intent to hurt, right? It may not be physical, but
Yeah.
and you just said about you're a person with energy and feel energy and vibration. So violence is an energy, right? So forget how it's manifested first. It's an
Yeah.
energy. So even if you say, well, boy, I just given something trivial. Boy, your head big. And I say your head big or you're stupid. And I seen it all the time. That's to diminish, that's violence, that's an intent to hurt. So the
Yeah.
vibration is violence. So then it's very possible it will be met back with violence. And your version of violence and my version of violence may be different. Now, I'm not condoning any form of violence, but also understanding where, and you're saying, women, so you said some women in terms of the empowerment, right? If if you know, well, I'll say hopefully know or could analyze, if I provoke this person, and I'm not even saying man or woman now, if I provoke this person or I be violent against them with my words, this person could react violently physically, and that is a possibility, right? And if I could take that because you shouldn't be violent with somebody if you're not prepared for violence. Now I say you shouldn't because many people don't do that. Many people violent and think that nothing will happen to them, right? And again, this is not even male female because um when I was in university, I remember a lot of this is female lesbian couples had a lot of violence in the all female dorm. It had a lot of violence because I was an RA. So as an RA, as a resident assistant, all the other RAs would speak to each other, and the RAs in the all female dorm said that the violence among women and same sex couples was high. And then they asked us, well, what we experienced, and we say, well, of course, it is less. Not saying it didn't happen, but
Right.
they were explaining, and we were wondering why, right? And we didn't have a definitive answer because we didn't interview. It wasn't like a scientific study or anything like that. But one person said that because the general narrative is that men are violent, when women are in same-sex relationships, they put their guard down and don't expect any violence. So even if physical violence, so even if they are emotionally violent, they don't expect physical violence. So they are less or more inclined to do it because they think the consequences wouldn't be physical. What do you think about that?
Hey, interesting, eh?
Pretty
So
much.
here's what I according to a study at CDC, 43.8% of lesbian relationships, the persons have mentioned that they have experienced violence. 43.8. So, you
43,
know,
that's pretty high. And do they have a comparison to heterosexual? I know CDC does the US, so we
yeah.
have US statistics, but is there a comparison to heterosexual or same-sex male relationships?
Oh, all right. Let me pull that up.
While you're pulling it up in the meanwhile, Celine, what do you think about what I just said in terms of my experience in university and the
And people think
same-sex women?
same. So yeah, because I really, really think that because it's not the norm, because that's not the conversation. The conversation is we want to end violence against women and girls, and the understanding is it's being the perpetrators are men. But the violence from woman to woman is very prevalent. It's there. But we don't talk about it because one, you're not seeing it. It's not, you see, this is the next thing with media, the space of media, whether it's social media or mainstream media. This is the thing about it because it's what we are being told. What we are being, what we have, what is being shown to us is what we will take and say, okay, this is what it is. This is the problem. This is the issue. But we don't really hear about those conversations. And you are saying just at the university level, it's happening. What if those relationships are still taking place? I've seen it before, not physically, but I've seen it where this person, I was at a line one time, and this girl is there talking to me. She introduced herself by the pet name, and she's there in the group of us, and she's talking with us like normal. When her partner came, she's like, "No, this is her name. Call her by her name." And the way that she said it with authority, I felt uncomfortable. So I was like, "What's going on here, boy?" But you saw that the girl, she kind of pulled back a little bit. But that is the same behavior you see in an abusive relationship, whether it's heterosexual as well. When somebody feels as though somebody else is in control of them, and when that person is in their presence, they feel as though, okay, I now have to cross my T's and dot my I's. I mean, you know about that,
Can
but
I say this? One of the issues we have, and now we're diving into it, is that there is a joy and a love to make men always a victim, always the perpetrator. And so it is that we speak about women, it's kind of like the term toxic masculinity.
oh God.
When we say toxic femininity, everybody get upset. What? Where? Why? So
But it is there, it is there.
apparently, only males can be toxic, but women are angels and perfect.
We
Except,
didn't matter, right?
and so if it is that they talk about the woman on woman violence, then there's an issue because now we're coming together and saying this is the problem, those men over there. And so when we have to say we are the problem, we women over there, then some women become uncomfortable because when you're turning it onto yourself and you have to examine yourself, not everyone as
Mm.
humans, it makes us uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So we can't come together and say we have a problem we need to fix
Yep.
unless it's their they're the reason.
Yep.
It's
You have to find somebody to blame.
yeah. I looked up
Exactly.
the data.
Uh-huh.
What they say is that for men on men, well, gay relationships, 26% of men experience intimate partner violence, and it's estimated that 35% of women and 29% of men in heterosexual relationships have experienced physical violence, sexual violence, or stalking by an intimate partner. So those two other options are a lot less than 43.8%.
And that's important because as you were saying, first Celine and then into Alvin, right? The importance of having the conversations and even what I said from the start, the importance is telling the truth. Because if we're not telling the truth, then we can't ever solve the problem. And a narrative is not necessarily the truth. Right? The
Yeah.
narrative is what whoever is controlling the narrative want everybody to think.
This
And in
man.
gender-based violence, men don't control the narrative,
Yeah.
right? So
Listen,
therefore, even women in their own personal relationship, let's say the same thing we just talked about a lesbian relationship. If women under the delusion that women are not violent, then they also open themselves up to it. This psychologist Jordan Peterson, he had a study, right? And he in his study he was saying, I think it's when you removed physical violence. So if you're judging men and women based on abuse or violence, but not physical, if it was all the others, then women are more violent than men in general, right? So we have physical violence because it's the most prominent, right? But there are all the other avenues of violence which we spoke about that could lead to physical, but also, of course, will create victims. And
Yeah.
if and I say women could be talking about women, if women, even amongst themselves, would not agree that we practice violence too,
Yeah.
right? And therefore, the only way, they say knowledge is power. So if we understand how we do it, then we have the power to manage it. So you can
So
empower yourself, women in general, so they understand that I could be a victim. So now I'm aware, I have the power, so that I could do things to mitigate it. And then those who have the potential to even be perpetrators also have the knowledge to be able to start managing their emotions.
yeah.
But I'm enjoying this conversation. But I wanted us, well, still in, look like you had a point, and then I want to shift to something else. I
You
see you
expect me
rub your hands together.
You really expect me to remember that? No, it's me, you know. Yeah, but I'm just what I wanted to touch on is the Johan say you hit the nail on the head. It is important to be naked. It is important. Yes, I'm taking a free plug for my podcast. But it is important for you to really acknowledge your own behavior. And it is hard. It is hard to do that because whoever wants to say, oh gosh, I'm doing stupidness, I'm being mean to this person. I shouldn't say this because of how I feel at this point in time. So that acknowledgement is very important. It takes a while to develop that. It takes intentionality to develop that. And once you get to that point, it's also hard for you to get out of the putting yourself in a frame of mind that you're always doing something wrong. That too is difficult. So it's a whole process that each person has to go through. But you have to start off by saying, oh my God, I am a human being. I err just like everybody else. And I cannot put all of this blame on one person because the statistics say that. Right? So, whilst we are trying to end gender based violence, we're trying to end violence against women and girls, we want to make sure that every individual addresses themselves. Stare yourself down in the mirror. I'm very serious. It works because I've done it plenty times. Stare yourself down in the mirror, deep down in your eyes, and say, hey, what are you really doing with yourself? How do you really feel about yourself? Not only feeling about yourself, but how do you the way that other people interact with you, how do you feel when that happens? So when you behave a certain way, how do you think that that person feels? Life is all about balance. So I oftentimes would say, whenever I say to someone how they have offended me, and I try to do it with grace these days because I'm getting older, I just stop cussing. But I know that anytime soon. But so you have to, you let somebody know, okay, this is how I feel offended by you. And but in that same time, you still ask yourself, what do I do to not just this person but other people when I'm interacting with them? How do they feel when I'm interacting with them? So you get yourself in a place where you try to make those adjustments as you go along. And I think that is the root cause of what the root approach, or the way that we could start by eliminating this ill of violence. It's about checking yourself first. Yes, you might be the victim, but you might also be the villain in another scenario without even knowing either of them, right? So check yourself. Whenever it is you feel something about somebody's behavior towards you, always balance that off with saying, how do I behave with people and how do people feel when I behave a certain way? So I really think this is a place for us to start and highlighting the statistics, just like with the crime situation here. This is just my opinion, but telling us that the serious crimes went down by so amount, not helping the situation. It just igniting the upset of the population, because it's like we're hearing about this every day, and of course mainstream media feels as though we have to see it on the front page every day. So you're pelting this in my head every day that I have to see this, and yet you're hearing authorities saying serious crime has gone down by 2%. Whoopie ding. A man just get killed while you're saying that, right? So if it is, we encourage our society to say, well, okay, and we know it's not going to happen, maybe not even in our lifetime or our children's lifetime, but start somewhere. But in highlighting how you feel offended by someone, ask yourself the same question: what am I doing to somebody else? But to say that we something I saw, is it last week? It was World Computer Literacy Day. And I'm reading the article for my audience, and then it says something about women and girls. It's like, but men need to be literate too, computer literate too, because we are in the digital age. And then one of my listeners called in and he said the same thing. He's like, why is it that you talk about just the women and girls? I said, well, I guess this article was specific to some societies that lack it altogether. That's not our experience here in Trinidad and Tobago. For us, it's for people who are impoverished, who can't afford a computer or a phone or whatever. So it's a different thing in different societies, but the part with only focusing on women and girls, if we want to see that change, we as women, we need to start respecting ourselves, respecting our peers in terms of other women. And that's how we uplift other women, by respecting them and authentically doing it. And then we talk to our men with respect as well. Let them know in a loving way how you have offended me. And I will even go further to say, as I say, I like to match energy here, and I know violence is not a good thing. But if a man puts a slap on me, you're getting it back. I'm sorry, but you're getting it back. At least
Well,
that might jolt the person into saying, hey, what's this way? I know you're
well,
right.
let me jump in. I
Yeah,
know Alvin is saying wanted to switch the lane, right? And this is something that just came to me. We don't have to expand on it now because I
yeah,
know
yeah,
time and things like that. But you said, feeling that violence is a bad thing. Maybe violence is not a bad thing now. I'm not saying it's a good thing, eh?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
violence in nature, violence, right,
yeah,
is part of nature, right? And in my working with people with anger management, right? Letting people embrace their anger is what helps them learn how to manage it. So
love
tell me
that.
what you want to do the person. Tell me how all the seemingly horrible things, and once they're able to voice it and
Yes,
come to terms
yes,
with it and understand why is this. After that, it's gone, right? But when it
yes,
stays in them, and again, this is us facing the reality
yes.
because I talk to plenty men and women, and they say, sometimes I feel just, I wish I could stab you, I wish I
Ooh,
could just push your hair, I wish I could just, I know something you not even wish. Sometimes in that moment, I just feel to do X, Y, Z, But, I can't say that. I'm not supposed to think that, right?
mhm,
And then you beat up yourself on it. But then when it stays inside of you, it starts to ruminate. It starts to become toxic. And then, of course,
yes,
energy doesn't just disappear. When you
mhm,
suppress energy, it has to come out, right? So if we're not embracing who we are, many of us as human beings, we are violent, right?
yeah,
And I'm not saying that we going around intending necessarily to hurt people, but somebody get a bad drive, you imagine the car crashing. You imagine things like that, and that's real. But if you don't deal with it, if you don't acknowledge it, then it
yeah,
will stay in there and it can manifest itself in a way that you're not able to
yeah.
manage it.
Absolutely, because you know what? In acknowledging it, that's where your healing starts. That's where it starts. But
I
because, just like what Johansi was just saying, Alvin, about the narrative that is present, and we try to not engage that or to be a part of the narrative. So you keep everything inside because you feel you're hiding, right? So you feel like, as Johansi was just saying, you don't want to say what's on your mind. But if you are we are primal beings. So if something gets you angry, of course you're going to react it. But we have to manage these reactions. But by just vocalizing it, even if it's to yourself, to say it out of you, not in your mind, but to say it out loud in your room, you go in your bathroom and you scream it out or something, it
I
does help
remember
that healing process,
I
I
remember
believe.
when I was in high school, I used to have an anger problem, and what I did is I used to talk to God. I'd be like, listen,
Wait, just now, hold up. You had an anger problem? Mr. Cool, calm, and collected? What?
Well, the others would give you stories, and I'd be like, God, you see, right now, I want to do X, Y, Z. I know I shouldn't, but I know I'd
Mm,
enjoy it. So help me to not do it. And
mhm.
in having that conversation, in being emotionally honest, that
Right.
allowed me to be the calm, collective individual you see right now. Another thing though, this is a conversation that we need to have. We call the police. Why do we call the police?
Mm.
Because they're capable of great violence. How can we say that violence is wrong? Violence in the right context is good. If it is that you are with your parent and someone comes to kidnap you and you protect your family, or there's a home invasion, you protect your family, you employ violence. Did that violence not keep you safe? So there's nothing wrong with violence. The issue is when we use violence in the wrong context. But we don't have that conversation because we expect men and women to be soft and docile. And then when, again, like I said before, we meet the world and the world is evil, the world has good and evil in it. And if it is that we're incapable of recognizing that, hey, this man has a particular streak that is dangerous, I
Yeah.
need to be careful. Recognize, hey, this young lady, she says these words and they're hurtful. I need to maneuver myself accordingly. If it
Mm.
is that we're not aware of the fact that the world is violent, schools are violent because the children from the schools come from society.
Different, yeah, different
If
background. Mm.
society has violent people, how can we be shocked when there's violence in schools?
Mm.
So, what we have to do is we have to recognize that each individual is capable of violence. And then we have to equip ourselves so that we're capable of defending ourselves. And when you defend yourself, there are times when you need to employ violence. And so, if it is that we're telling young ladies and we're telling young men that violence is evil and violence is wrong, that's a lie. And if
Well,
only the ones who have evil intent employ violence, then everybody that is good is lambs to the slaughter.
so how are we going to, we can't fix the problem right now, but how are we, Johan, say, how are we going to change this behavior from your professional viewpoint in terms of you're presented with this, and we spoke about the narrative that's present, but we know what the truth is. So I think the place to start from is truth, yes?
Exactly so. And that's where we already starting this evening, which is acknowledging that, well, at least how I describe it, life is a jungle. The world is a jungle, right? It have rabbits, it have lions, it have bears, right? And you are to choose which one you want to be and don't pretend that the predators don't exist, right?
Mm.
And that something wrong with the predators and they shouldn't be there again. I did a segment recently that says should is a fantasy, right? What something should be is what you think it should be, which means it's not real. Acknowledge what it is. So acknowledge that they are predators. Acknowledge that they are violent people. And you may not like it, right?
Yes.
But you acknowledge it there and you equip yourself in the best way for you to be able to mitigate it or even defend yourself. So whether that is physical, learning how to physically fight or physically defend yourself, or be able to spot signs of it, right? And you'll see sometimes how you do that. If you start, even if you start reading about what predators are, you'll start to learn. Listening to other people about it, once you seek any knowledge, you will find it, which might make you 100% prepared, but it will
Mm.
make you more prepared instead of putting your head in the sand and saying, nah, it just shouldn't be there. Nah,
Yes.
it do exist. Nah, that is a man problem. There's something wrong with all your men. We need to re-educate the men. And they say that, and of course, statistics show that's still not working. So at this point, is to do something different. And I
Yep.
agree with you. Facing the truth that violence is part of life, and it don't have to always be physical violence. we think it, we have violence thought. So if we, because if we run from our dark side, and dark to mean bad, dark just mean hidden. If we run from our dark side, then it will fester. Then we don't know it. So then when it rears its head, we don't even know how to mitigate it. But
Yeah.
understand, and just like Alvin said, violence can be used to defend yourself. Because the same woman that might say, well, I don't want a man who violent. If somebody come and oppose them, now they want the man to employ violence to protect them. Right? So it's the same way. And even I like flip it even with men, right? It has some men who don't want to deal with certain women and they will send the wife to deal with it because the kind of violence the wife could employ may not be physical, but it have other types of violence. I send my wife for she, yes, right? So it's the same way we want those violence, but to be able, and Dr. Jordan Peterson said the same thing, is to become a monster and meet your monster so that you know how to manage and control it. Because
Ooh.
all of us, he said, all of us have a monster in us,
Yeah.
right? Right? But if we pretend it do exist, then again, when it raises its head, what is this thing and you don't know how to manage it. So I'm going back with you, and if we go in solution based, start with talking the truth about violence. Let everybody talk, hey, I want to do this thing. Why I
Yeah.
want to do this thing, let me understand so that I can manage it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, what I would suggest is everyone, I keep singing this song, everyone needs to know how to defend themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You see, those who wish harm are a lot, they have less. Okay, a lion looks for the old, the young, the sick.
Hmm.
Apex
And the
predator, but
slow
in
one, the
fast.
slowest one.
Yes.
He's not looking for a fight. He want food. He's hungry. He doesn't want to
Yeah.
work for his meal.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we're aware of our surroundings, and even when I speak to the young men, I say you can't have your headphones in. You're walking on the road in an area that is there's a higher probability of you getting robbed. You have your headphones in, which means that you have a cell phone,
Mm-hmm.
so you're a target.
Yep.
Your headphones are in, which means both of them are in, which means that you're not hearing what's happening, so I can sneak up on you and rob you.
Mm.
Your phone is out. You're talking, texting to some young lady who might be safe in her parents' vehicle
Mm-hmm.
while you're traveling. Guess what? You just get robbed because they see the phone. And so we have to make people aware of their surroundings. And that's one of the good things about self-defense. It's not just violence, but it is avoiding violence. I wanted to mention this. There are a number of persons who I know who have been in abusive relationships. And I'm always curious. I ask them, what is it? Was there anything that you saw looking back that gave you an idea of who he was? And every one of those to date have said yes. How he spoke to his mother,
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
his
Yes.
relationship with other women,
Yeah.
how he behaved when he was angry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things I tell young ladies whenever I speak with them. I say, listen,
Mm.
look at the young men around you. Does he have female friends? How does he speak to his mother? Okay, he and his mother has a bad relationship, no problem. Does he have aunts? How does he speak to his aunts? Does he have sisters? If every single woman in his life wicked and evil, and I don't know why, there is something wrong, and it ain't the woman. So we have to have that conversation because
Mm.
that isn't us blaming the woman. That is us preventing
Yeah.
something from happening.
I
But we have
really.
to run to the next thing. When it
Yeah.
happens,
Mm-hmm.
and a man and a woman is fighting. I'll tell you this story. I remember I have a virgin of mine. So it's not me. I say a virgin because it's a virgin and it's not me. We're in a conversation and he was shocked and he was annoyed and he was like, listen, 2 days ago, I was by a cure and I see a man and a woman fighting and I step in. And when he stepped in, the woman and the man started fighting him. And he was like, you see me? Never again. I don't business. And that is one of the challenges we have with intimate partner violence. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we often say that we have to protect women, but there are times when And I'll give you another one. This one happened in Jamaica. There was a man and a woman who were fighting, and a man came out of his vehicle, stopped, and he intervened. And he was a FUL. He had an FUL. And when it when everything was settled, the woman changed her argument and said they were minding their own business, and he just came in out of nowhere. And during the investigation, the man had to give up his FUL.
Oh no.
Now everybody knows he had an FUL, and so he was exposed because he was not able to protect his family as he was before. And so, will that man ever see two persons in a relationship having a violent interaction and stop again? What about my virgin who was who was attacked by both of them in Europe, in the middle of Europe? So now he's embarrassed, he's attacked, and he's looking like a fool.
Wow.
These are some of the conversations that we don't have because it's about men need to be allies, which I hate because it implies that first of all, why do we need to be allies? It's just a natural thing. For you to say that men need to be allies, it implies that somehow we are enemies.
Oh, but
And
you're
we need
outside
to,
of this circle. You're outside.
yeah,
You're outside. Yeah.
you over there, I am over here, and no, no, we're one. There's no on earth I would want to be here if women weren't around.
Mm.
We are one, and so the question is, how do we handle how do we have a discussion about the fact that even if there is intimate partner violence, there is a high probability that that woman, she loves the man. When she sees you put a stop to it, you step to him, her love is being threatened,
Mm.
and she steps in. Now you're like, why did I
But sometimes it's fair too, if it is, especially if it is that this person, whether it's the male or the female, is dependent on this other person for companionship, for finances, for a place to stay, and you're fighting, somebody comes to intervene.
I see.
Coming to interfere with this, but you really want to help because this person could potentially, their life is under threat here. So you come in to help now. And that situation in Jamaica where the woman turned on when it comes to testifying now, she turned on the guy with the firearm to say, hey, this man was the perpetrator, you know. And a lot of the times we hear of situations like that where you try to intervene as a caring party or as a friend or a family member who would have been seeing things happening from before. You saw the potential for these things to happen. And it doesn't even have to be the physical part, but when you see she's behaving or he's behaving differently in a scenario when this person is around, as opposed to when you're hanging out with them by themselves. If you see something differently and you confront them, you say, y'all don't want to go for counseling or something like that. Who sent you to push in your mouth? You're fast and I don't know what you're talking about and this and that and the other. But all you are doing is caring for this person. You're caring for the both of them because it's a couple that you know. And
Stay out of big people business.
so then, Johan, say you, in your capacity, what is the best approach to something like this? Because I remember having an episode on my podcast. It was that keep your advice to yourself, huh? That was
Well, in this day and age, I would say the best advice, one, let's say, is on the street. You see two people fighting, man or woman, right? Call the police,
yeah.
right?
In danger.
Because you're not in this situation, you are assuming what's going on, right? So let me say, you see the man hit the woman a slap, right? You That's all you saw. So therefore, you now going to assume something, and you're going to come in with an assumption, and we know what assumption cause, right? So you don't know what happened before the slap happened. You don't know why the slap occurred, but in your mind, because of the narrative also, because narrative is something that's programmed in your subconscious. So
Correct.
because you see it, the narrative come up one time and you want to dive in. and then you find yourself in a monkey pants. Versus the best thing is to do is to call the police, call the authorities. If you call the security guard, who somebody, call somebody of authority who
Yeah.
supposed to be the objective and who have the actual authority to do something, than putting yourself in problems, because it have a likelihood you might save a life, yes, but have a likelihood that you might end up in a place that you wouldn't want to be, right? Because sometimes we say violence is the intent to hurt, but sometimes I've seen, and this more from women than men, she violent him and say, "Well, why you want to hurt him? I thought you love him. Yeah, I love him. I just want him to do what I want. Yeah, he not doing what I want. So I hit him a little lash. Or and you see people fighting and she not doing what I want, or he not doing what I want, and but both of them love each other, but they're trying to convince, and that is big people business again in between, with
Mm-hmm.
you assuming what is going on, right? Because even, I mean, I've knew had some stories. I know one guy, the he intervened in a fight, and it was the man was seriously beating the woman, as in blood was
Oh my
present,
gosh.
right? And he come in and he break it up and things, and other people came and break it up, and then police came, and then afterwards the woman didn't press charges. Now you could say maybe she was afraid, maybe etc. etc. But he became angry. He was like, "We do all of that," and then
She still come back.
and then the result he wanted, because remember he intervened and he
Right.
wanted a result in their relationship.
Okay,
Yeah,
yes.
and here where I'm coming from, because you're not in the relationship. So you intervening to put your intervention and to get the results you want to happen
Mm.
Right. Right.
in two people business. Now I'm not condoning the violence between them,
Right.
but again,
Right.
you intervening, you coming with your thing and your projections, which of course may not be in your benefit. So the best thing to do is call whoever authority. If it's call the principal, call the guard, call the police, call the mayor, call the whoever it is had the authority in that scenario, versus you putting yourself, inserting yourself in it.
Now we know that a lot of the times we hear of the hotline numbers to call, they are all over the place, right? So people know what numbers to call. But yet, when you call a police station or you go to the police station, you get a restraining order, which is a piece of paper which may not save this woman's life eventually. Because we have had stories, we have seen it and heard about it where a woman lost her life after she went and she did the right thing. She went to the authorities, or a bystander or a third party went and reported it. But sometimes you are meted out by, you met with the behavior by the police, especially if it's a man being abused. He will go to the police and the police laugh at him. And I just get really angry when I hear things like that, because it's like it's
Run.
also very, very real in in our society. It's very
Why
real.
is get angry?
Hmm?
Why is get angry? You see, it's get angry when things like that occur.
Yeah,
Why is
I
get angry?
guess because abuse is abuse, regardless of who the perpetrator is. And if this man comes to you to say, "Hey, I came here because my wife hit me, and this is not the first time it happened, or whatever," why would the police want to laugh at him? He's doing the
Well,
right.
the thing is, I understand where anger come from, and this is where, for me, this is how I deal with life, and even how I coach people. Is that reality is reality. If you can't look to the police for help, then you have to figure out how to help yourself.
You
And
have
we're
to.
going back with learning how to defend yourself, learning how to read situations. So saying what somebody should again is fantasy. Just like how you're saying you do
Mm.
the right thing, which is to go to the police or go to the whoever it is, or even in schools when we deal with bullying, the right thing is to go to the teacher and the principal. But the right thing is to do whatever makes you not a victim anymore, right? Because plenty children just go to the principal and the teacher and nothing is done. So you have to learn how to defend yourself. Plenty victims, male or female, go to the quote unquote authorities and what nothing is done effectively so that they're not the victim anymore. So then you have to learn, and how you learn is many different things. It could be being more emotionally intelligent, learning different things, learning how to fight, learning changing your job so you have more money to be able to get out of the situation. Whatever it is, you could figure it out, because there's no one size fits all. But don't put faith into something that not bringing any results and then quarrel and then just say this is what they should be doing. look again the truth of the situation, and then explores many possibilities to empower yourself.
I have a scenario where there was this young lady in my sister's her prayer group, and she said that the girl was being really badly beaten by the guy. She has like 3 children or something like that. So she wanted somewhere to stay. I told my sister, no, not by you. I'm very sorry, but not by you. And you know, you really, really want to help people. And when we hear about 16 days of activism, we hear about all of the things that we could do around surrounding, supporting each other as women. You ask ourselves, oh my gosh, what is the right behavior here for me? Because I really want to help her, but I'm also putting myself and my family in harm's way. If I let her come to stay by me, if this man come there, he dealing with everybody, you know. So then in a situation like that, I suggested to her, let her go by the police and hopefully they will guide her.
Or
But
take
you
it to
know,
a shelter.
take her or to go to the shelters. And I hope that the shelters, I don't know what their criteria is for a woman when she comes to the door to say, hey, I'm being abused, or is there a step before that that you go to say, is it that you go to a therapist or you go to social services, whatever that authority looks like here? Do you go to that first and then say they will apply, they will send you somewhere? Because a lot of the homes for battered women are secret places. So some people may not know the location. So I wonder how does that happen? Have you had, Johansi, have you had patients who you had to refer to having to go to a shelter, a home for battered women?
Yes, and there are places you can go. Besides the police itself, of course, going to any police station, there's
Mhm.
the victim support unit in the police itself. There's also the gender based unit in 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 the police itself. There are NGOs like rape crisis. Even though it may not be a rape, you could go to rape crisis. For you
Yes.
could go to families in action for
Mhm.
assistance. Also, off the top of my head, those is what I could think of, right? But even there are some ministries now, like social development, community affairs, where they are gender based
Yes.
units and go there. So for me, I would say explore every single, you could Google it, every single thing in Trinidad that says domestic violence or gender based, explore it. Right? And the likelihood of you getting help, I think, would be high. Even though you say you explore 10 and you only get help from two, right?
Yeah.
Two is still better than none. If you
Of
only get
course.
help, you explore 20 and you only get one help from one is still better than none.
I agree. And I really like that you highlighted that in our society here in Trinidad and Tobago, because oftentimes you'll hear people saying there is no help anywhere at all. But look at how many names you just called there. So there is help out there. And I think it might be a good practice for anybody, because you never know if your partner might turn on you. So for anybody to just be, get acclimated with all of these agencies, the numbers have them close at hand should something happen in your interaction. And it doesn't have to be in a romantic relationship. You have a situation where children in the home might become violent. You never know. Um, for whatever reason, your children have started to become violent, and the mother getting licks from the son or the daughter self. All of
Yeah,
these
that
things are
actually happens a lot
complications.
more than we might. It happens a lot more than we might think
Yeah.
about,
So
unfortunately.
you're saying, and are we agreeing then that to the final topic that we were talking about there in terms of intervening when you see a situation taking place, we are agreeing then that leave it to the units or the implemented like the hotlines that there are, the police service, so all of these agencies, that they can handle it. They're equipped for that. The ways in which you can handle that to be able to save someone's life. Because if you go in as a family member, a friend, or an innocent bystander, you could get yourself and probably lend in a negative way to that situation as well. Hmm.
So
Right? And that's not doing nothing. Calling somebody is still an intervention.
That's
So you
the
could
thing.
intervene, but you're not putting yourself in any difficulty.
so the that is the safest and simplest way. If, however, they're at the cusp of what I gather based on the conversation is, if, however, they're at the cusp of, if it's a life-threatening situation, you may wish to get involved, but if you get involved, do not expect that the situation must end up how you wish it to end up. Like her going to the court to press charges. I remember, and if that is the case, so it's a risk that one must not be forced to make, but
Right.
one may wish to take, if you follow me. I mean, I personally will not say I will not step in if I see someone's life at risk. Um, but in stepping in, I must be aware of the fact there are and there are possibilities which are unpleasant that may happen.
Yeah.
And therefore, I must step in recognizing what those possibilities are and be willing to, therefore.
Yep. 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 Hmm.
But the safest thing is what Johansa says.
I agree.
Um,
So we will really encourage people to get themselves accustomed or familiar with all of the various agencies so that this is in ours, and even if you're doing it to help someone else, you make that call, at least know where they can go to, kind of like. Hmm.
Definitely. Definitely. I was just looking at one of the shelters that I pulled up. Um, a safe house for victims of domestic violence. Um, so the number is, I just pulled this up. So I'm assuming these numbers are correct. You can dial 1-868-800-SAVE. That's the
Okay.
domestic violence abuse hotline. Of course, the rape crisis center, the 24-hour hotline is 868-627-7273. That's 868-627-7273. And the San Fernando area, the 24-hour hotline is 868-657-5355. That's 657-5355.
Right. Hmm. Good stuff. So we would have identified and touched on some really well the three areas that you wanted to touch on tonight, and I hope that it was fruitful. Our sharing was fruitful for the audience. It may have been a different conversation from what you would expect in a 16 days of activism conversation. We
And if you
really
have any questions, please type them out quickly so we can try and answer them before we wrap up. Thank you for your time and for being with us. So if you have any questions, type them fast. And earlier we had some good evenings from Jervon Joseph and Catherine Modest.
uh-huh.
And Catherine had, let me just pull those up one time. So Catherine had told us good evening. So too had Jervon Joseph. Catherine had agreed with the emasculating of the men, who oftentimes some women will do so. And she had mentioned, yes, it's hypocritical behavior as well.
Yeah.
So we had some agreements in the audience. Some agreements in the audience. While we wait, thank you very, very much for your time, for joining me on this discussion. What I love, as you mentioned, is the fact that it's different, and it does speak more to the realness of it, as opposed to simply saying, hey, this is what we want. It's talking about the reasons why it still continues. Um, it's also talking about some of the statistics that need to be addressed, because if it is that we're speaking about women on women violence, then it if we don't speak about it, then we can't address it.
Yep.
And it also, if we don't speak about some of the challenges that persons have in assisting, like the fear of being turned on, then we can never know what we can truly do, or rather, we don't want to be in a catch 22
Yeah.
environment when we are in that situation, or we at least want to be naked and honest with ourselves about what we will do if we are in such a situation. So thank you once more, Johanse, clinical psychologist, behavioral specialist, Sailing Griffith, the wonderful voice you hear from what, 6 to 10
Heartbeats.
on Heartbeat 104. Yes,
Yeah.
that's who we have in our presence today.
I just wanted to say before we wrap up that I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge women who would have lost their lives to violence. We hear about it a lot, and it has been very prevalent in our society, and we know it's very much prevalent throughout the world. And so I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that and to offer some support by way of thought to the families who are still grieving from the loss of these women, and these situations that are very much unfortunate. So if we could just have a moment of silence for that. That their stories and all of the other women who stand up for themselves, who have established help and support for other persons who are experiencing gender based violence, that we continue with conversations like this so that it will encourage us to face the truth and really do the work to eradicate gender based violence. And thank you very much for having me.
Yes, Alvin, thank you very much for having me. Also, Celine, thank you for being here. I think this was a entertaining and insightful and different conversation, as you said. And I hope, well, not hope, but we could continue it, whether we're doing it together or even in our own
Yeah,
network. We could continue conversations like this.
yes,
Awesome.
absolutely.
But hold on. We have a question. We have a question. We have a question.
Mhm.
Jervon Joseph says, my question in anger, when you stay quiet and you stop talking before an argument with your significant other, why is it that the other party carrying on and you stay quiet and listen as a man? So I'm trying to decipher.
I would say in response to that, you can't control anybody, right? So even if you decide to stay quiet, the person have the choice to carry on.
Yep.
You are now, your decision is whether you want to stay and take the carrying on, whether it is you want to be with somebody who is carry on like that. For whatever reason why they carry on, you do have the power to change them.
Yeah.
So you have to decide if you want to live with this for the next 20 years, or if you want to do something different. If you address it with the person already and they're still not changing, then you ought to know what you can live with.
I agree. I agree. You see, sometimes we act with expectation of, if I stay quiet, you're supposed to stay quiet too. But we, as Johansi was saying, you really can't control someone else's behavior. And so
And
good on you for trying to. But funny enough, I went to a seminar recently and they were talking about this same scenario here where you staying quiet. You're staying quiet, but you're creating a chaos within yourself. Maybe for the moment you're staying quiet, but by staying quiet, you're creating a chaos within yourself, disturbing your own peace. Do you think that you're adding to this person's peace or you're taking away from their peace as well? It's so much for us to think about. And I mean, in a moment, you really can't think about everything. So, yes, choosing to stay quiet, but I hope that if this is your situation, Javon, or if you've seen situations like this, that you're able to say, well, or suggest that you talk about it still. If the person is still carrying on, remove yourself from the situation because you don't want it to get to a state, but obviously staying quiet at all. Maybe in this moment, yes, but you have to come back and talk about it so that both parties can come to some middle ground. I believe in that. I believe in those conversations. And even if that conversation will entail a third party, like Johan say, then so be it. But let the person know how you feel and that kind of thing. But I don't really endorse the staying quiet part. But in a situation like this where you're in the moment, absolutely, you could maintain your silence. But don't expect the other person to hush because you hush.
See, thank you very much for that.
And thank you, Joe, for your question. Yes.
All right. Well, we thank you again for to the panelists for being here, and thank you for the person who stayed with us.
Of course, they can see it after, yes?
Definitely,
Yeah,
definitely.
it would be up for them to see it again. They could still ask questions there. That's really cool. Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for the forum as well.
Same to you, everybody. Enjoy your evening.
You too. Thank you very much.
All
Take
right.
care.
It's up.
Good night.